Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is the secret history of the world economy, and the world economy began about 500 years ago, and the most radical, extreme, transformational events happened throughout 1800 and 1900, making the world economy rise 200 years old. And um, I am explaining the four mighty rivers of the Himalaya mountain range and how they are a foundation for the world economy. And this is a essential understanding for who you are and what is life. And it will, this this understanding of these four mighty rivers and this history of the secret history of the world economy is fundamental to understanding the situation today in 2024, where there are genocides and wars, and to um, understand the power structure of our world now. So there is a terrible campaigns by Netanyahu's army on the east shore of the White Sea, the Mediterranean Sea, and in the land of Gaza and in the land of Lebanon, and then even in the West Bank, and this is all the West Amman territory and the South Beirut territory. And so there is a massive destruction now in Beirut. It's one of two megacities. They're not actually megacities, they're 3 million and 4 million people. Beirut and Amman on the east shore of the White Sea. And so they are the largest economic power base in that area. And the genocide of Gaza that happened in this over this past black year of 2024 had begun in October of 2023, and it continued throughout 2024. And that is the what's happening in Gaza now and what happened in Lebanon over this past month. I have described this in the report for November of 2024 and the report for December of 2024, which we will record on a video for convenience and for to help in the uh, acknowledgement. So, 4,000 years ago, the first cities of the world are groups of 5,000 people. And you would only find the first cities of man in a place where there was a confluence of rivers, where rivers come together. And this is where you will find any large city at that time, at an intersection of a river. And you would not find large groups of people near any ocean shore unless it was at a delta, a massive freshwater delta. Because so the larger cities would always be upriver. Then the uh, basic areas for the development of mankind were along the Nile River here, along the Euphrates River here, along they say it's the Rhine River here. There is, for Russia, it would be along this Volga River, and for this area, it would be along the Indus River, and for China, it will be along the Yellow River. So it's 4,000 years ago, it's 2000 BC, and the biggest cities are 5,000 people. They are in those areas. They would be at those riverheads. So 3,000 years ago, mankind learned how to smelt uh, soft metals. They would find soft metals in the river basins, and understanding that heat can conform these materials to different shapes. And this was an essential tool making. And 3,000 years ago, this is 1000 BC, the stronger and the higher melting point material of iron was beginning to be used. So iron is stronger than bronze and copper, and it's also harder to um, make it. It needs to be hotter, and so it's harder to make things out of it. So iron was developed later. That's the Bronze Age, the Copper Age, the Iron Age, and it brings us up to 2,000 years ago at time zero. And at that time, any water travel was done with small boats carrying handfuls of people, and it would be along the rivers. But at this time, the area in Egypt, Egypt is in a need for precious materials, and there is a nearby place named Phoenicia, and that is modern day Lebanon. So 2,000 years ago, at around time zero, the Egyptians are have made 3 expeditions out to Lebanon, Phoenicia, to establish a trading port and to be able to ship cedar timber back to Egypt. And that cedar timber was essential for building boats. What else? Only ships. The cedar was explicitly for the technology of ships. And they got all of this cedar and they brought it back to the Grand Nile Delta, where ships would be so valued, highly valued here, more than anywhere. And they even built a canal that would allow the Nile River to connect to the Red Sea. And that would be the first time that they were able to get any kind of water travel from any part on this whole half of the world over to that half of the world on the water. So 2,000 years ago, any kind of trade from between across the world was traveling upriver onto the Tibetan Plateau, which is entirely inhospitable to human life and a incredible journey. And the reason why would be that the largest cities in the world at this time, which could um, which were so bountiful that they could um, how do you say, share this bounty. They could spread this bounty to all the world. And so they just had the most things, and they were sending it. And so anybody who wanted to get a lot of things, they would probably be over here because they didn't have as many things. And so they came all the way over here, and they understood, wow, there is a ton of things here. All of these people have pretty big cities, and there's a lot of things all in them, and they're starting to get more powerful. And they made this connecting route. It's a land route, and it goes across this treacherous terrain, and it goes to across Iran, across Iraq, and across the great desert of Syria, the barren waste land of desert, over to this area here by the Tiberis and the um, Dead Sea, because there was already ports there which were accessible, and it was the only way to take this land bridge over to Europe. And so they would travel by land around the seas, and the final destination who controlled Europe's trade 2,000 years ago, here in Italy. Then the time of antiquity is from 500 BCE to 500 after death. So this is around 2,000 years ago. It's the time of antiquity. The Iron Age has ended. And this transforms into the Middle Age of man, which is around 1,000 years ago. So 1,000 years ago is the Middle Age for man. And the modern era is around 500 years ago. And it continues till about for 100 years ago. So throughout the modern era, there is this transformation of humanity, and it takes its root in the history of India and the history of China, which I am describing in a more um, uh, like relatable way now, because the last um, description was just so extreme that I had to give a more comprehensive understanding of what is occurring. And it is so it is now around 600 years ago, and we are going to transform from the Middle Age to the modern era. And it's 600 years ago, it's the year 1401, and the um, first ship to travel on the ocean, the first ships to be able, of course, there's the Vikings, but the first ships to be able to travel a distance, an oceanic distance, is going to depart from Europe here, and it's going to sail down the shore of Africa all around this west shore of Africa and down the coast. And it would be 88 years later that the first vessels are going to be able to move from Europe to India. So this is Europe and this is India. And there is a powerful, so economic and so powerful of a force here, which we're going to be able to describe to you. And the Europeans understand this to be life and death, the end of life as they know it, the end of their existence. So, in a savage and desperate journey, they're going to travel from this shore out to Brazil in South America and relaunch that ship because they are sailing. They are going to use a sailboat in 1488, 500 years ago, and they're going to cross this distance in 3 months, following the trade wind. And they are going to depart from South America for the tip of Africa and spend another 3 months just sailing at less than 10 knots across this ocean. And they're going to round the tip of Africa, staying along the shore to the east shores of Africa, out onto the Horn of Africa. They're going to wait for the wind to blow once again, the seasonal winds, and they're going to come across the south of the Arabian Peninsula and land at Surat here at the Panhandle in West India. And they come to load up their ships with goods and to establish a trade relationship, which would allow over the next 100 years 5,000 ships, just ship after ship after ship, with loads after loads after loads. And it would be like entirely like Santa Claus. This is the Merry Christmas, loads upon loads of things that you never had, that no one ever had, that no one could ever get. Just um, porcelain, silver, coffee, silk, metal, cottons, saltpeter, indigo, just riches upon riches, and boatloads upon boatloads. And they were carrying them from India to Europe, transformational, and just Jannah. It was heaven. This was the good, the bounty of heaven just coming down upon Europe, things that they had never had. And it's 500 years ago. So any man who returned from India, who invested in 100 euros in the into trade, would be returned just 1,000% of his profit when he returned. And Europe, the kings and the rulers of Europe understand that those ships are going to rule Europe. That those the goods and the trade of those men who control those ships are going to take control over, take usurp all power of Europe, and they do. So it's 1600, and they establish the East India Company in a voyage, and they return 2 years later after bombarding and raiding India all down the ports from port to port along the west shore of India. They raid it and they subjugate every leader along, and they establish a port all the way down until they reach Calcutta. And Calcutta, it's one of the biggest and oldest trading city ports here. And the rulers, because it's a larger city, the rulers gave the East India Company a run for their money. They gave them hell and killed a lot of them. And because the Europeans were so determined and they came in force with a number of ships, they were able to overwhelm the largest powers of India and to establish that trade connection by force. It's 2,000 years ago in China. And sorry, it is 2000 BCE. That's 4,000 years ago when the first known cities of China are established. It's 4,000 years ago. And the around 3,000 years ago is when the first largely established city or large kingdom is being established here at the top of the river, upriver at Xi'an, Xian, in China. And this city becomes a central power for China, and becomes rooted in the historical power structure, and even to this day for China. So around 1,000 years ago, so 2,000 years ago, it's the three kingdoms of China. That so there are three kingdoms, and the kingdoms are dynasties, areas where they had concentrated economic power and concentrated the populations of the people. So all of China is 50 million people 1,000 years ago. It is an essential understanding of the power structure of this area and to understanding what will happen now. It's 1600, it's 400 years ago, and there's going to be a transformation of the world power, which will make some new power structure. It's called economic power. It's an economic power that had its significance had never been known or experienced until 1600. And so there's going to be this transformation in 1600 involving the East India Company, which is going to set and establish something called a world economy. And it's going to dramatically transform in 1800. That's 200 years ago. And it's going to this incredible transformation unrecognizable in 1900. And to understand that, you would have to acknowledge the essential power of the four mighty rivers of the Himalaya mountains, which I will describe to you. This here is the Himalaya mountain range. So this is the largest geographical structure on the planet. And it is an important understanding about geology is fire and water and how that works. So there is all of life is based on a chemical reaction. And in this chemical reaction, there was a separation of chemicals here. And reaction, the chemical reaction caused all of some kind of chemical material to be magnetized and separated out to one side of the Himalaya, while everything that was while on the other side of this mountain range were all of a different kind of chemical. And this different chemical was being so reactive that it was just moving up into the sky, and it just went up and up 10,000 feet, 15,000 feet. This is chemical reaction is just boiling like a cauldron. And there is a distinction here, a chemical separation here, which caused those jagged peaks of a mountain range. And the one side is plateaued, and this is a geological phenomenon. It's in all mountain ranges. And this side would be raised so high in elevation, and that it would reach the sky. It reached the sky, and it couldn't go any higher due to the revolution of the planet, and it was limited. And there it stopped at 15,000 feet, and uh, all of it's called the roof of the world, and it's catching water, and the processes geologically are generating water, and the water is generating down fissures, and then these fissures start to pool up the water as well as take the runoff. And this is just like a fully geologic ecosystem, and it's pouring water down in 1,000 streams all down the face of the Himalaya mountain range, the rivers. So the rivers have developed these these systems are what man depends on for life. So they are the four mighty rivers of the Himalaya mountain range. You can see that here's the cauldron. The cauldron comes all the way up, and then one side of the cauldron she's boiled over, and she's come down and she's created the Yangtze River, along with actually a whole set of rivers just streaking down this way. There is the Indus River, and it comes here and it branches off here and here, and there's a parallel river that runs here. But most all of the all of the life giving properties of the river are here at that Indus. Then there is the Ganges. The Ganges comes along the face of the mountain and out into this area. There is a river here named the Yangtze. It's part of the Four Mighty Rivers, and it comes down throughout this way and out into Shanghai, and it has a branch. It's not fully connected. It is the Pearl River that goes out to a huge economic zone here near Hong Kong. And the last river is the Yellow River that starts up in the plateau, curves down and around, comes through that archaic city, Zion, and up out near that Chinese horn by the Yellow Sea. And the sea is named after the Yellow River due to the pouring of the sediments throughout the river. And there's another river in this area that's significant, but it is not of the Four Mighty Rivers. It doesn't hold the population or doesn't have the life bearing property to support strong any kind of rivaling power. It comes through this peninsula, and this is an Asian peninsula. It is Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam, and Cambodia. Those are the four mighty rivers of the Himalaya mountain range. And I'm going to describe now, or continue to describe, how the power structure is connected to these rivers and why this is the foundation of the world economy. So it's 1600, and the East India Company are making thousands of voyages to India, and they are bringing back all of these goods to Europe, and the importance to the power structure is immediately recognized. Just it's like unlimited power. It's they stand in awe of it. By 1630, 30 years later, there's famine in India where 20,000 people are starving to death because of no food in India. And this time, as I told you, for now from 1488, so about 100 years, 100 years, there is this massive trade belt with the East India Company, and the people of India are dying by the tens of millions, while Europe's getting hog high. And there is a series of events, and I need to be sure to connect everything. So it's in this time, as soon as the East India Company in the 1500s is rising and it's now transforming to 1600s, the the powers of China, which are nestled along the Yellow River, or there's multiple kingdoms, but the strongest powers are at the head of the Yellow River, it was essential understanding that the um, China's power base is in an area where there is a confluence of multiple rivers, which are very important, and its status at the river, upriver, at the river head, is how they were able to leverage power. They could leverage power and to leverage the power upriver for a city downriver to gain power of life and death, and power over the upriver was much more difficult than it was to be a predator upriver and to prey downriver and to wield control. You essentially had a protective area. So this is part of the Yellow River here, and it comes to this area here where this first city was established. You can understand the importance of this area when you see that there is the mighty Yellow River here. Here is that mighty Yellow River, and the Yellow River is going to move all the way out to the ocean. It's very big, and it's going to turn northward here. When it turns northward, it's going to start going up into the mountains. But here at the corner of the Yellow River is another river, a connecting river. It's the River Wei, and it comes this way just a few kilometers before it's at the city Xi'an. So there is the city Xi'an, and there is the corner of the Yellow River, and there is a connecting river. It's the River Wei, and it comes squiggling through all the way through until it gets over to here, and it actually comes through. If you look into the city, you will see that there is a huge amount of water access. There is rivers and streams coming all through the area, throughout the city, here and here, and how the and here's more of the river, and you can see how the life embedded itself into that center of the rivers. And there are more rivers that come down this way and connect onto that Wei River. So more rivers come down and connect into it. And there are two other rivers that come down this way and connect into the Wei River right before Xi'an, and that would make it a huge intersection point, river intersection point right here, that is being protected by the mountainous plateau, and it's being protected by these sort of higher grounds here, and all of the fertile bed has is uh, seated there. So that is the area of life. So in 1200, so two or 3,000 years ago, the Chinese realized that these rivers are so important that they make canals. They try to make a canal to connect a river to a river. And essentially, what their intentions are are that they understand that this area of the Himalayas to be a unit, a land of them of their own, and they always want to be able to connect these. They understand that there is this big power of a Yellow River and this massive Yangtze River power, and they want, if only we could connect these two powers, and they would build canals. And so finally, at about 600 after AD, um, they finally finished this Grand Canal. It's made up of many different canals over 1,000 years' time, and they used 5 million men to labor just in this one small section of the Grand Canal in 600, and that is 1,500 years ago. And this connection at about 1,500 years ago, about the year 600, is going to unify or allow the China to become much more powered unto itself. So there are only a handful of empires known to man. The empires of the Byzantine, the Babylonian, the Roman empires have no comparison in size. Could never hope or dream to compete with the size of the British Empire and the size of the Mongol Empire. And that's it. There's no other empires that were ever as big, just the British and the Mongolians. Um, and there was a Russian Empire that was quite large. And there was never anything in comparison to the size of there's the Russian Empire, the British Empire, and the Mongol Empire. Nothing ever came close to the size of those empires. And in the when the, as the Mongol Empire becomes the biggest empire known to man ever, far rivaling the size of any empire that had ever been known before, and that's about 1300, 1400. The Chinese, who are going to be the main prey of the Mongol Empire, are going to understand this great need in the in the power structure that they were going to make the Great Wall of China, and this is economic infrastructure. The Great Wall of China is this massive, massive wall that's very tall, like 50 feet high, and it's going along the mountains here at the um, near the at the intersection of the Tibetan Plateau with the foothills of China. So the biggest empire ever known to man, and what happens? The Chinese build the wall, the Great Wall of China, and there's no empire that could ever be as big as the Mongolian Empire until 300 years later. It's the British Empire, and it goes under the name East India Company. And there's going to be this incredible world battle between the East and the West that's going to break out after this. It's the Mongols are going to, the Mongolian Empire is going to subside, and the British Empire is going to rise. So the Chinese are building canals 1,000 years ago to connect these rivers and increase the power. And then 500 years ago, they went so far as to build a wall, an incredible wall. These are economic infrastructures, permanent. Um, so we are leading up to the 1700s. And throughout the 1700s, there's going to be a great exportation chain set up to move all of this things out of India to Europe. Within 30 years, they'll have killed 20 million Indian people to make Europeans live a life they never dreamed. And in 1740, Safavids from Iran are going to come and raid Delhi. And what's essential about Delhi, the city Delhi, is that it's up the Ganges River, it's upriver in the Ganges, and it's going to be a massive economic zone of power due to how many rivers are there and has an essential understanding of the structures of the rivers, which I did show. So with the Ganges River, it's coming along the Himalaya mountains, and it's going to look like a tree. It's going to have a branch with branches and a branch with branches, and it's going to come winding its way around branch with branches, and continue through branches, and branches. And that's the Ganges. And the Delhi is going to be sitting up there at the headwater. And in the biggest waters. Um, the Yellow River, as I described, it's on the plateau. It comes around and hooks and goes out into North China seas. The Yangtze River comes through the center of China and straight out to the other side on the east shore. And it has this parallel massive network, the Pearl River, which they tried to connect, that leads out to Hong Kong, another massive economic zone. And the Yangtze runs parallel to the Mekong River, which runs parallel to several other rivers, and it goes down I'll call it the Asian Peninsula with Cambodia and Vietnam. So, uh, in 1740, the Mughal Empire, which was a Indian empire, smaller Indian empire, it uh, goes to the city Delhi and they raid all the treasury. They take all of the silver and gold that would be used as an international exchange because in general, um, you have to trade something of great value in order to be able to conserve that purchasing power. So the Europeans may take loads of silk as cash dollars, but they might not take um, everything as an exchange for dollars, and certainly not in every country. But whereas a universal exchange could be silver and gold. So by removing this, they removed the power to pay an army. And that happened. The Iranians came in and took it away from the locals who had been ruling that area. in India. And then it is 1755. The East India Company is going to start hiring the Indian people to be part of their army. And it's so lucky for them that 10 years ago, the former power structure was annihilated, completely reduced to dust. So that was helpful for them. And 1770, there's going to be a massive famine in Bengal. And so that was Delhi was the top of the river Ganges, and the bottom of the river Ganges is Bengal. And it had 20 million people. And they killed half of that population by famine while they were exporting all of the goods. And then they made up this fake story, this conspiracy where they were going to um, try to change the European power structure. And the Europeans were in full comprehension about this, that the the power of that trade was enough to control a kingdom and to overthrow a king with a flick of a finger. It made the overthrow of kings very easy. So by 1774, uh, the East India Company is going to come into a partnership with the government, where the government was going to get 50% say in whatever the East India Company does. So essentially, the East India Company is becoming the arm of the state. And that would allow, instead of just uh, whoever was the men, the former lords and princes of Europe who control the East India Company, or those powerful merchants, it would sort of create this power sharing where they would not be the sole investor and to his discretion anymore, because the state needed to have some kind of uh, you needed to generate a legitimacy over that the society of their land, of the land. In 1774. So 10 years later, there is successions of genocides killing tens of millions at a time. And it continues for 100 years. And so this is the great face of the East India Company. It's right around 1800 now. And here's the genocides: 1783 genocide, 1791 genocides killing tens of millions. Then 40 years later, 1837 genocides. In this time, the Punjab from Pakistan along the Indus River decide that this is getting crazy. We got to do something. We got to go to India. And it's our neighbor land, so close and near to us, the Ganges. And we've got to, what are we going to do about this East India Company? So they come to Delhi at the top of the river, and they kill every man over 16 years old in the city in order to try to destroy whatever economic treatise was there, and destroy the East India Company. That's what they wanted to do. Punjab came to India to destroy the East India Company in Delhi. And within a couple of years of this destruction of Delhi, um, there is a continuance of genocides. There is a um, disintegration uh, in power, and in that area, and but really, obviously, the massive trade from the East India Company throughout 1800 was in its prime, and it was massive. So they are exporting like madmen out of India, and 1860 genocide killing tens of million. 1865 genocide killing 5 million. 1868 genocides killing tens of millions. 1876 genocides, 1896 genocides, and 1900, even 1900, the end of the 100 years, genocides in India, 10 million dying of starvation. So it's the year 1800, the years 1800s, and all of those ships coming from the East India Company, starting this great world commerce, are using sails. They're sailing. They're sailboats, sailing ships, and the fastest that they would go is if they were using their oars to row those boats. And they're going to row half the world, and they're going to take 9 months to get these ships back. 9 months shipping time. So, your shipping and handling charge, 9 month journey to Europe. Oh, no, you don't. In 1800 is a great transformation for the world economy, and it involves a technology called named the steam engine. And for the first time, they would be able to go faster, um, and on this voyage, this travel would become intensely faster. And not only that, but they would be able to get a lot more in one go because they could move a bigger ship using this power, and it was the power of the steam engine. And the moment that they were understanding how to propel objects with steam instead of oars, they understood, well, what's stronger than steam? And they went right for that combustion engine. They were like, put gas in it. Let's see if that'll make her fly. And she did. She flew up into the sky. And this transformation is going to occur in this time 200 years ago. We're going to be lifted out of the dust, out of the um, high waves of the massive ocean. We'll be just lifted out, and live life that they could never dream of. And this is 100 years old of our history. It's infancy, and it is the 1800s, and they are starting to use their steam engines. And the East India Company comes back in Europe, is working on a big plan. It's 1800. And the plan is that they're going to use joint stock to companies, and we'll just call them corporations. And what we'll do is that anyone with enough money can purchase a share of this business that we're going to do. And what it means is that you put a little bit of money on this share, and then when we make the trade and we make a profit and we make some money, that your share is going to be increased due to the profiting. And so joint uh, stock companies raised Europe out of the dust, where they were moving wagons with carts, and now they suddenly needed roadways. And not only that, but in order to bring in all of this products and things, they were going to be needing commercial blocks in the city. We need a whole infrastructure of large buildings, and we would want them, connected with ports so that our it's shipping accessible, and we would need to have carrying firms so that when everything arrives, that we can carry it out into Europe along a roadway. And the first large infrastructure, like a 10-story building made of uh, cast iron, with a cast iron frame, was built by joint stockholders in the East India Company to their riches, and they built the first um, commercial blocks. And they built bridges, some bridges using these cast iron. And it was about 35, 40 years later that they were understanding that the cast iron um, couldn't compare to a new technology named steel. And with the steel, they were going to go higher and stronger than they had ever gone before. And for it would be impossible to raise any uh, building construction greater than 20 levels, 20 stories, unless you have steel. And you wouldn't want to do that with cast iron. You wouldn't want to go more than 10 stories with cast iron. So, in 1800, it's 1885, and they built the first steel skyscraper, and it's turning on to 1900 now. And in 1900, there's going to be the rise of the combustion engine. It's going to transform everything we've ever known, and it's going to create this surge of power. And that is embedded with the history of China, as I've discussed before, and in detail. I'm going to detail now. So, for thousands of years, the people of China have had rivers flowing from elevations of 10,000 feet down, raging, flowing water flowing down, 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 and just oh, and the rivers are on average 50 feet deep, 100 feet wide. They could get up to like 70 feet deep and being like 300 feet wide, these rivers. And a man can easily lose his life on a river. Any man on the shore of the Yellow River can look to it and know that easily death awaits you. You would not play any kind of game with this river because this river would be the end of you, and it could also be your strongest power. And as they learn from seeing that river flow, and so the Chinese are going to be among the first to be able to not only harness river flow because um, of the size of it, but any water wheel in China is going to be spinning with tremendously more economic might than any other river could provide, other than the other mighty rivers of the Himalayas. So it's incomparable river power. And um, around 1800, the Qing dynasty of China is got all these canals trying to connect the Yellow and the Yangtze River, and they're always upriver trying to terrorize everyone downriver to subjugate them and control them. Why? Human labor, to exploit human labor, to get other people to do the work that's needed for all of this bounty so that he can sit atop it. So that is um, the gift of humanity is his manpower, and that the devils of the world are trying to exploit human labor and to rob his power, his life, and to hoard it for the purpose of control of life, to control humanity, and for a perversion in controlling life. And any any man who kills 1,000 men is a dictator. Any man who kills another man for control is a dictator. And certainly every man or group that killed thousands is a dictator. So it's going to intensify in after 1800 in China. It's going to become a power struggle. In 1840 to 1860, China starts the fight with the East India Company. So they start fighting over the opium trade because, as we discussed before, the East India Company was not even going to send money from Europe to buy things anymore, not going to even pay for things anymore, because they were going to be making such a killing off of India. They were going to tax them and exploit the labor so that they would just make 20,000% profit and um, control the life there. And this time, 1800s was the century of genocide. The black century of genocide in India is the 1800s. And the people of China are looking over and they're seeing this, and they're seeing especially that the East India Company is trying to sell opium, make a profit, buy tea, and then send that tea over to their trade partners on the other side of the world. And that was a problem for China because China was making money off the tea and China was making money off of the silk. So why should you make money off of my money? Why should you? They were doing was exploiting the profit. They were they took the trade. They took the tea trade right out of China's hands, and to take the the birthplace of tea, the most powerful tea economy that has ever existed in the history of the world, they robbed it right out of their hands. And so China understands that there's a power struggle going on here. And in that time, they do they start the conquests. So the Qing dynasty understands that the East India Company is very problem, and they start to try to fight them. They start up 10 conquests. And so the King Dynasty is going to um, attack up on the Tibetan Plateau to try to control that area. They're going to attack all down the Asian Peninsula in the Vietnam area, down the Mekong River, to try to control that area. And they're going to try to take a firmer control over all of the Yangtze. And this is the farthest that the Mongol Empire had ever managed. Was the Mongol Empire was, before the British, the biggest empire in the world that humanity had ever known, and they had control of that Indus River and the Mekong River and part of the Yangtze River, and that's how that was the Mongol Empire, to come down from that plateau and to control those river downriver. And so China is going to try to remove this Mongolian empire influence and try to become the new empire, take control of this same areas while rivaling this explosion of Europe in the Asian trade due to their mobility. So in um, in the 1890s to the 1940s are a series of power struggles and wars where China is struggling for the economic partnership with all of the lands around him, especially on that Asian peninsula and west of it over to India and up north at the Korean peninsula and even out to the islands of Japan and Taiwan. They are trying to get back control. They are fighting for control of the area. Um, and who are they fighting? The United States, with their fingers in every pot, from the United States Japanese, from the United States Indians, from the United States Vietnamese, from the United States South Koreans, and everybody. It's all about wresting control away from this fundamental power core named China, because he's got the power. It's with him. So it's a struggle, and there's genocides throughout the 1900s all along this peninsula, um, Asian peninsula, which is that wing under China, um, Myanmar, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand. And there's going to be a turning point here. And there's, at the 1900s, starts the gas wars. That's the power of the combustion engine, World War One, World War Two, and now World War Three. And at the end of World War Two, it's 1950, and they are going to divert a lot of attention away from battlefield, and they're going to start to make this economic commitment, and they're going to try to rise um, in their economic power from an agricultural power base of producing indigo, cotton, everything, um, sugar, tea, opium, from agriculture into a whole new world of production named industry. Industry means machines, and you never had machines, never, until now. And the machine are because they run on gas technology, engine technology, and this is where the great genocider Mao comes in, and he's going to start a new China. And in New China, what will happen is that all of the property will be taken away from the Chinese and they will be killed by the millions for it. They, they will be killed under revolts, killed under protests, and then they would just be genocided by the hundreds of millions in work camps under Mao, where he would just take 100 million people, send them into work camps after, which is a jail, after removing their property. There's no home. You'll never go home. There will never be a home. They were sent to concentration camps and genocided by the hundreds of millions at 1950, especially at 1970, while China's rising economically. So the whole uh, purpose. So in this time, while he's genociding tens of millions, 100 million people, supposedly, according to the expert professionals, China's going to grow from 500 million people to 900 million people. So that's to say, while everyone's starving to death, they were having 20 babies. Seriously impossible and sick. It's totally, total lie about the human history. And furthermore, they tried to say that in 100 years of China's history, that we have gone 1 billion people. They're telling us in 100 years, 1 billion people came to life in China. And they say the same thing for India, that 1 billion people magically arrived to this planet while they were genociding. So it just seems totally impossible. And in this time is the megalopolis era. A megalopolis era, what it means is that they are going to build skyscraper cities as fast as they possibly can, and as big as they possibly can. And they will, um, it could be known in one way as Shenzhen speed. And what Shenzhen speed means is the city of Shenzhen, right up the port of Hong Kong, is the biggest megalopolis on the planet, 70 million people. So in one of these, in the cluster, the city Shenzhen, um, they are going to build uh, 200 skyscrapers that are more than 500 feet tall within 30 years. And in 30 years, the skylines of Shanghai, of Hong Kong, of every major city, including Shenzhen, this is Shenzhen speed, is going to transform from two-level buildings to 50 to 100 level buildings. And this is about 40 to 50 years of building skyscrapers. In 40 to 50 years of building skyscrapers, there's nowhere on the planet that has undergone a transformation like this. And that was due to the essence of that power base that they just build hundreds of thousands of skyscrapers, hundreds of thousands of skyscrapers using, obviously, because who could make 100,000 skyscrapers in a megalopolis other than China? Where would you put it? Who would build it? No one. You could only have this here. You could never get the manpower needed ever anywhere. And this is fundamental power structure in the world. So the average man in China makes €100 a month, and they don't own property. So I feel this is the as many details as was humanly possible. There is a no free speech in China. There is a massive internal security network, which is absolutely required to be able to exploit mankind, the human manpower of China, to be able to take control over it, requires no free speech and constant security in the most intense amount. And this is totalitarianism. It means that an outside forces want total control of your family. They want total control over you. They want to control everything about your life. And more than that, they want you to work and provide the beauty of life and work and work and work. And they would even kill you. It would even rob you entirely, essentially, from your life. This is the satanic, devil worshipping culture. This is the dark side of the force, and it the light side of the force will always reign here. It will always be the reigning power here, and never for 1 second will the dark forces rule the world, because um, life is humanity. Life is existence, and anything that goes against life disintegrates against that life drive. The life drive is existence. Anything that goes against it disintegrates. And that is exactly what we have now, is that you have these dictators, genocidal dictators that rose out of the East India Company, absolutely 100%. And to this day, parade under the names of joint stock companies named corporation, and they are continuing this on massive scales. They've lost control. They're disintegrating. They're turning on each other. They're eating each other alive. The the activity in China, what they're doing to the Chinese people to subjugate hundreds of millions of people, a billion bajillion people, they think that because they were so successful here in China, they think that they could just go ahead and do that everywhere. And that's their plan. And obviously to do it, to be able to maintain that kind of control over human life, they need everything. They need bombs. They need nuclear weapons. They need strong policies. They need disinformation. They need cronies to spread disinformation. They need everybody pleasuring themselves and living in a la la land, totally disrupted from any capacity to um, locate themselves in existence, to know who their existence. So we will continue to connect this with the secret world history, and we will release videos as promised through the week that will describe the activities of Netanyahu's army and this world joint stock um, in Gaza and Lebanon, in the east shore of the Mediterranean Sea. So that is November and December of 2024. Alo Akbar, and may God protect us.